I thought that racing through a stormy night, crashing into a transformer, and causing a blackout in half of the financial district, and then being saddled with a $9 million debt was the absolute worst point of my 24 years of life. However, when I was brought before that man Julian Thorne, a man who could make all of San Francisco tremble with just a glance, I realized that all of it was just the beginning. I thought I was just an unlucky person who had caused a terrible accident, but the way he looked at me was like a net that had been waiting for a long time. I thought I was desperately fleeing the insane obsession of my ex-boyfriend, Leo Vance. But I had actually run headfirst into a meticulously planned, deadly trap. What kind of story was hidden behind all this? Let's turn back the clock to that rainy night that changed everything. The cold rain fell like countless steel needles, stabbing mercilessly at my windshield. The neon lights of San Francisco distorted behind the watery curtain into a psychedelic haze. In my rear-view mirror, a sleek black Porsche clung to my tail like a panther that had locked onto its prey. Inside was the man I once thought was my entire world, but who now only wanted to drag me to hell. Leo Vance, come on, faster. I was practically begging my old Toyota. Just then, swerving to avoid a pedestrian who had suddenly run out, I yanked the steering wheel hard. The car instantly spun out of control and crashed into a huge transformer box on the side of the road. Boom! With a deafening roar, the entire city block before me plunged into darkness. Before I could recover from the violent impact, several blinding flashlight beams shone on my face. A few men in black suits with grim expressions surrounded my car. One of them pulled open the door and said to me, politely but with an authority that could not be questioned, "Miss Ava Chen, our boss would like to see you." And just like that, I was taken to Julian Thorne. He sat in the center of the darkness, and everything around him seemed to stand still because of his presence. Behind him was a massive floor-to-ceiling window, and outside was the city skyline that I had just extinguished. He didn't look at me, but at the view, his voice low and calm, yet carrying a chilling power. "Do you have any idea that your little stunt just now interrupted my servers for 7 minutes, costing me $9 million? I was too scared to speak. $9 million? I couldn't pay that back, even if I sold my life. Now you owe me." He finally turned his head, his gaze like two sharp, cold beams cutting through the darkness and piercing straight into my heart. "How do you plan to repay me, now that we're at this point in the story? Isn't it exciting? An ordinary girl, saddled with a sky-high debt in an instant, and entangled with such a mysterious and dangerous man. Can she possibly escape? Don't worry, hit that like button, subscribe, and we'll continue. I promise the rest of the story is even more thrilling. Julian's men quickly dealt with Leo, who had been chasing me. I don't know what methods they used, but I never saw him or received a single call from him again. Julian just mentioned casually that he had convinced Leo to develop some new hobbies. That casual tone was more terrifying than any loud threat. I was taken to Julian's estate by the sea in Sausalito. The estate itself was a work of art, with a modern, minimalist design where every detail exuded ultimate taste and absolute security. I later learned that Julian's Thorne Group, on the surface, was a top-tier global logistics and security company, but its tentacles actually extended into many legal gray areas. I thought I would be imprisoned or forced to do terrible things to pay off the $9 million, but instead, Julian gave me a set of blueprints. "This is a preliminary concept for a safe house I'm planning to build," he said, pointing to the drawings. "But I'm not satisfied with the designer's proposal. I've looked into you, Ava Chen. Your urban fortress project in college won an international award. Your insights into space, structure, and human nature are interesting. Now, I want you to work for me. Design the world's most indestructible sanctuary. Your debt will be cleared only when I am satisfied." I was stunned. I went from being a prisoner to his exclusive designer in a flash. The drastic change was hard to adjust to, but what shocked me even more was that he knew everything about me. Over the next period, I began to work day and night. Julian gave me the best equipment, a top-tier team to assist me, And also, the greatest pressure. He would spend entire afternoons in the design studio with me, discussing every detail, from the layout of the ventilation system to the molecular structure of the bulletproof glass. Our conversations started with work, but gradually, I discovered another side to him, hidden beneath his cold exterior. He would hand me a hot cup of coffee when I was tearing my hair out over a technical problem. He would stand quietly behind me for hours while I was still drafting late at night. We talked about architecture, art, and urban planning, and I found that our souls connected on so many levels. A strange feeling began to blossom quietly in my heart. I knew it was dangerous. He was like a bottomless vortex that could swallow you whole if you got too close. But I couldn't help being drawn to him. His strength, his focus, and the occasional glimpse of loneliness he revealed had a fatal attraction for me. However, just as I was starting to let my guard down, thinking my life had taken a turn for the better, the first misunderstanding hit me like a bucket of ice water. Late one night, while searching for data on a special alloy material, I tried to access a deeper server. By chance, I found an encrypted folder named after me. On a whim, I used a temporary system vulnerability to bypass the security. The contents of the folder sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't work files, but an analysis report about me, so detailed, it was horrifying. It contained not only all my public information, but also my psychological profile, personality weaknesses, family background, and even some private details from my relationship with Leo. At the end of the report, there was a financial ledger titled Asset Delivery, Chen, under which a huge fund transfer was recorded, dated the very night of my car crash. Asset, delivery. These two code words slithered into my mind like venomous snakes. So, in his eyes, I was no different from how Leo or Volkov saw me. I was just an asset, an object to be analyzed, used, and even delivered. Were all those days of warmth and connection just a performance to make better use of me? A cold sense of being fooled and betrayed rose from the bottom of my heart. From that day on, I changed. I no longer discussed anything with him outside of work. I became silent, efficient, like a precise machine. I locked away all my emotions, building a thick wall of ice between us. Julian obviously noticed the change in me. The warm atmosphere in the design studio vanished, replaced by a suffocating silence. He tried to speak several times, but seeing my cold profile, he always stopped short, until one evening, he blocked my way as I was about to leave the studio. "Why?" he asked directly, his voice tinged with a frustration I had never heard before. "Why what?" I feigned calmness. "You've changed, Ava. You're avoiding me." His eyes locked onto mine. Did I do something wrong? I couldn't hold it in any longer and let out a cold laugh. "Wrong? Mr. Thorne, you never do anything wrong. Everything you do is calculated with the utmost precision, isn't it? Just like that. Asset report on me." He froze for a moment, then seemed to understand, a complex emotion flashing in his eyes. "You saw it?" "Yes, I saw it. I saw how you analyzed and delivered me, like an object. What's the difference between you and Leo?" I shouted, agitated. Julian was silent for a moment, then turned and opened his private safe, taking out a file and handing it to me. "The delivery you're talking about, is this it?" It was a detailed report on where the funds had gone. I saw that the huge sum had been divided into dozens of payments to private investigators, cybersecurity experts, and there was even a sum paid as hush money to a university professor who had taken a bribe from Leo to leak my personal information. Every single payment was an expense incurred to extract me from the web Leo had woven. In my world, anyone can become a pawn for my enemies to attack me. Understanding you was about protecting you better, not using you, he said in a low voice. That word was cold, I admit. But in my system, any person or thing that requires resources for protection is marked as an asset. It's just a designation, Ava. If you were hurt by it, I apologize. Tears streamed down my face instantly. So, what I thought was betrayal and calculation was actually this. At that moment, I knew I had been completely swept into this storm, and Julian was the only one who could possibly protect me in it. The real crisis always comes when you least expect it. That night, the estate was attacked. The alarm sirens pierced the quiet night, and the sounds of gunfire and explosions came from all directions. Julian's most trusted head of security, Sebastian, rushed into the design studio and, without a word, took me to the secret safe room located beneath Julian's study. This safe room was my design. "Stay here, don't come out." Sebastian's expression was unusually grim. I was locked in an absolutely safe space, but my heart was in my throat. Through the monitor screens, I could see the battle outside. Although the estate's security system was strong, the attackers were clearly well prepared. They knew the layout of the estate intimately, even by passing several traps I had designed. I watched as Julian was shot in the shoulder during the firefight, pinned down in a corner by enemy fire. In a critical situation, my mind raced. How could they know my design so well? Unless there was a traitor. And that traitor was very likely Sebastian, who had just brought me here. A terrible gas formed in my mind. Volkov didn't just want to capture me alive. He wanted to use this attack to destroy Julian completely, and I was the bait to lure him into the trap. No, I couldn't just sit here and wait. Using my designer's privileges, I opened another emergency exit from the safe room. This passage led to the service corridors of the estate, the veins of the entire building, and only I knew their layout perfectly. I moved through the corridors like a ghost, using the building's own structure to evade the enemy sight. I found the manual control console for the estate's security system. I took a deep breath, and my fingers flew across the keyboard. I reprogrammed the fire sprinkler system, directing high-pressure water jets at the enemy positions, pinning Julian down. I initiated a momentary overload of the backup power supply, causing the lighting system in half the estate to short-circuit, creating chaos. Ultimately, with my help, Julian's team turned the tide and successfully repelled the invaders. When I emerged from the passage, drenched and exhausted, I met Julian's deep gaze. He walked up to me, ignoring his own bleeding wound, and reached out to brush the dust from my face. "I underestimated you, Ava," he said softly. At that moment, all fear and anxiety vanished. In his eyes, I saw admiration and a feeling I hadn't dared to hope for. Our relationship was transformed in the crucible of that battle. So, don't you think the female lead is cool and badass? From a gentle designer to the key figure who saved the day. Want to know what happened to the traitor? Want to know how the relationship between the main characters will develop? Don't forget to like and subscribe. The upcoming plot will blow you away. After the attack, the estate returned to a state of calm, but an undercurrent was still surging. 3 days later, I feigned a casual entry into Sebastian's office. Among his personal belongings, I found an encrypted satellite phone. Using my knowledge of electronics, I cracked it. The contents confirmed my worst fears. Sebastian was the traitor. However, among the fragmented pieces of decrypted information, an intercepted encrypted transaction record threw me into immense confusion and pain once again. The record showed that 5 years ago, a shell company under the Thorn Group had a secret financial transaction with a tech company where my brother Ethan worked before his accidental death. The second misunderstanding was far more violent than the first, nearly breaking me completely. Ethan was the eternal ache in my heart. 5 years ago, he, a top-tier programmer, was killed in a lab accident. Now, this information felt like a poison dagger, stabbing into my heart. Was Ethan's death not an accident? Was Julian also involved? Was he keeping me here, not just for my designs, but also to monitor a victim's family member? I stormed into Julian's study with the evidence, my body trembling with anger and grief. What is this? I slammed the tablet down in front of him. Was my brother's death also your doing? Am I just the sister of another competitor you handled in your vast business empire? Julian looked at the information on the screen, his face instantly becoming incredibly grave. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a pain and struggle that surpassed even what he showed when Sebastian betrayed him. Ava, let me explain. I don't want to hear it. I cut him off hysterically. I will never trust you again. I turned and ran back to the safe room I had designed, locking myself in completely. I used the protection he gave me to fight against him. For an entire day, Julian stood guard outside the door. He didn't try to force it open. Instead, through the thick alloy door, he told me, in broken fragments, the secret he had been hiding all along. It turned out he wasn't the one who killed Ethan. He had been investigating Ethan's death. He had long suspected that Volkov was secretly recruiting and even kidnapping top tech talents for his dark network. And Ethan was one of the people he suspected had disappeared. That transaction was his attempt to acquire that company to protect Ethan and other programmers, but it had failed. He kept it from me because he didn't want to give me false hope when I was still grieving. To prove he was telling the truth, he even remotely activated a dormant asset he had placed within Volkov's circle, taking a huge risk of exposure to send back a photo. When the photo clearly appeared on the safe room's screen, I covered my mouth, tears streaming down again. The person in the photo, though much gaunter, was my brother, Ethan, whom I thought about day and night. He was alive. The safe room door slowly opened. I looked at Julian, his eyes bloodshot and weary, and my heart filled with regret and an unprecedented love. The final wall between us crumbled in the wake of this extreme misunderstanding and his complete honesty. He wants to set a trap. Julian's voice was hoarse but incredibly firm. So, we'll play along and turn his trap into his funeral. And this time, we're bringing your brother home. At that moment, I felt no fear. I looked at the man before me with only one thought in my mind. I will fight by his side. The final battle was set in a deserted opera house on the outskirts of San Francisco. It was the location Volkov chose, thinking he was in control of everything. According to the plan, I would act as the bait, while Julian's team would be lying in ambush. On the day of the negotiation, I wore an evening gown Julian had prepared for me and walked into the gloomy opera house. Sebastian followed behind me, his eyes a complex mix of guilt and a crazed obsession. Volkov sat on a throne in the center of the stage, like an evil king. Standing beside him was a figure that struck me like a bolt of lightning. My brother, Ethan Chen. Long time no see, my dear sister. Ethan's voice was unfamiliar and cold, but I knew he was acting. Volkov laughed triumphantly. Surprised, aren't you? Your brother didn't die all those years ago. He's a top-tier programmer and has been working for me all this time. It was he who cracked all your so-called genius designs. My mind went blank. My long-lost brother had become an accomplice to my enemy. What a ridiculously cruel and dramatic coincidence. Now, you have two choices. Volkov said, give me all your knowledge about security systems to use for my benefit, or I'll let you watch your brother die in front of you all over again. It was the whisper of a devil. I saw a flicker of pain and struggle in Ethan's eyes. He subtly made a gesture to me, a secret sign we had created as children, which meant change of plans, stall for time. My heart leaped. My brother wasn't a traitor. I took a deep breath and began to feign a breakdown, talking circles around Volkov with seemingly important but useless technical details to buy time for the people outside. Just as Volkov lost his patience and was about to give the order, the lights in the opera house suddenly went out. Julian's operation had begun. The sound of intense gunfire erupted in the darkness. Ethan took advantage of the chaos, pulling me behind a pillar and quickly shoving a USB drive into my hand. This has all the evidence of Volkov's criminal network and proof that he forced me. Go. In the chaos, Sebastian rushed madly towards Volkov, screaming, "You promised me!" But Volkov shot him without a second thought. Watching Sebastian fall in a pool of blood, I felt no sympathy. A traitor deserves his fate. Ethan and I fought our way out through the hail of bullets, but Volkov's target was always me. He caught up, cornering me on the roof of the theater. "You're not going anywhere," he sneered. Just then, Julian appeared. He was like a god descending from the heavens, standing protectively in front of me. In the end, Volkov's criminal empire was completely destroyed that night. Ethan was granted immunity for providing key evidence. The war was over. I looked at the man who had shielded me from all danger, unable to suppress my emotions any longer, and hugged him tightly. 8 months later, the San Francisco sun was warm and bright. In a penthouse apartment overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge, I leaned against Julian, my hand on my slightly swollen belly. Yes, I was pregnant, with twins. Julian had begun to completely transform the Thorn Group, divesting all its gray area businesses and turning it into a legitimate enterprise, focused on high-tech security and sustainable urban development. Together, he and I founded an architectural design firm. Our first project was to design free, ultra-secure shelters for people who had suffered from violence and trauma. We wanted to use our strengths to heal some of the world's wounds. Ethan became the chief technology officer of our company. The security systems he designed now protect tens of thousands of homes. That day, at the opening ceremony of our new company, Julian knelt on one knee in front of everyone and took out a ring. The design was one I had once doodled on a piece of paper, casually remarking, "This is the dream wedding ring." 6 months ago, we had a hasty wedding for the sake of security. His voice was so gentle it could melt you. But that was just a matter of convenience. Now, I want to ask you again. Ava Chen, will you marry me? Be my true wife, my partner for life, the mother of my future children, and rule with me over this empire of hope that we built with our own hands. With tears in my eyes, I smiled and nodded. My life began with a terrifying escape on a stormy night, and after experiencing betrayal, conspiracy, and the threat of death, it finally found its warmest harbor. I was no longer a victim in need of protection, but a partner standing by his side. We chose love, not fear, construction, not destruction. And that is our story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There will be many more exciting stories waiting for you in the future. Thank you all.